And now for the honorable member, Mr. Dharamkumar Seeraj.
Thank you, Comrade Speaker. From the onset, Comrade Speaker, please allow me to extend congratulations to the Honorable Minister within the Ministry of in the Office of the President with responsibility for finance and now public service, Dr. Ashni Singh, and members of his staff for compiling a budget which I find quite inspiring despite the Senior Counsel, Honorable Risedale Ford's statement that it is not inspiring to him. Maybe the honorable member is occupied with other matters and at his place and being unable to comprehend the fullness of this budget, or he probably is just too old to be inspired now. Mr. Speaker, I just want to quote on page 1, paragraph 1.3, to put things into context as to what is it that the People's Progressive Party Civic Administration would have met at the beginning of 2020 in August, after the 5 months, the torturous 5 months from the elections of March 2020 and the eventual swearing in of the government in August 2020. And I quote, Mr. Speaker, "It would be recalled that we came to office amidst crippling overlapping crises, a governance crisis caused by the APNU-AFC's refusal to respect the results of both the December 2018 no confidence motion and the March 2020 election, a public health crisis caused by COVID-19 and the unpreparedness of the public health system to cope with it at the time, and an economic crisis caused by both the aforementioned situations, compounded bad economic policy and woeful economic mismanagement from 2015 to 2020. This is what we took over. This is what we met, Mr. Chairman. And it is remarkable that today we can craft a budget with the theme, stay in the course, building prosperity for all, with an amount of $1.146 trillion. And Mr. Speaker, I hasten to add that it's not only the amount, it is the allocation. Where you put the funds that can determine whether you look at interest in the short term only, or you look at interest in the short, medium, and to the long term. And I must say, Mr. Speaker, that given the knowledge, the experience, the vision of the leadership of the People's Progressive Party, ably led by the Ministry of Finance, by the Honorable Dr. Ashni Singh, that this budget, whilst it would not have met with the expectation, the full expectation of all, there is something in this budget for every single Guyanese, and this budget is positioning this government for the upward thrust into the future where all will benefit. So those of you who find a little bit discomfort, and I find that there is a very small amount, let them take hope, Mr. Speaker, in the fact that in the years to come, lives of all Guyanese will be placed on a solid footing, and we will all be there to enjoy the benefit of our country, because the investments are being made now to create a solid foundation for the future. And Mr. Speaker, if the Honorable Mr. Risedale Ford could not see this, like I said, he's preoccupied with other issues and unable to see where this budget is going. He spoke, Mr. Chairman, about the pension, the increase in $3,000 in a disparaging way, as if this does not mean anything. And then went on to talk about the 6 times we came for supplementary provision. And Mr. Speaker, if as a government we come here for supplementary provision, It means we have more things to do, and more importantly, it means that we have the resources to do it. And whilst a budget is a guide, we also have to take into consideration the changing circumstances which meets our government and how we react to those changes. Mr. Ford, honorable member, Mr. Speaker, also went on to quote Ram and McRae, and he said that based on Ram and McRae, they will have approximately $100 billion going to wastage. Mr. Speaker, I also want to quote a financial analyst, and this time Joel Bagwandin I choose. And I quote, Mr. Chairman, what he said, I think was today, or was it yesterday? I can't remember exactly when. But he said that the central focus of Ram and McRae's budget criticism, and he was clear to point out, it's not an analysis, but criticism, was the inadequacy of the cost of living measures according to Ram. Although the analysis provided by the firm failed to demonstrate by way of quantifying the measures contained in the budget. Contrary to Ram's view, however, the cost of living measures altogether would amount to nearly $300 billion annually based on my calculations, including foregone revenues to the Treasury. This conservatively estimated sum represents 26% of the 2024 budget, national budget. More than quarter, Mr. Speaker. 110% of the sum to be withdrawn from the Natural Resources Fund to partially finance the budget 2024 and about 8% of the 2023 GDP. Moreover, it equates to an annual subsidization of $1.5 million per household for household expenditure. This is the power, Mr. Speaker, of the measures, or some of the measures that have been identified in this budget to address cost of living. Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Member Ford spoke about lack of consultation, and I think some of my colleagues would have named some of the organizations in Guyana who would have responded in a positive way to the pronouncements made last Monday by Dr. Ashni Singh. And these including, but are not limited to, the Guyana Manufacturing and Service Association, the Guyana Badminton Association, the Golf Association, Lawn Tennis Association, a number of sports agencies, a number of chambers, West Damara Chambers of Commerce, the Barbies Chambers of Commerce, Rupununi, Mr. Chairman, way down in Region 9. Their chambers also recognize what this budget is going to do for their region. The Georgetown Chamber of Commerce also, the Insurance Association, and FETOG also, Mr. Chairman, would have responded to, in a positive note, to the pronouncement made by Dr. Ashni Singh. Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Finance went at length to talk about debt. And I think the Honorable Dr. Ashni Singh went at pains to explain before that you will not be able to borrow if you're not creditworthy. And the fact that we can borrow means that we are good, on good standing. And we can borrow so that we can finance projects so that our people can start living the benefits now rather than to wait for funds to come in. And Mr. Chairman, a number of our speakers also point out the debt to GDP ratio. All of us likes to look at the United States or Canada in North America and some of the Caribbean countries closer to home. And if we look at their debt to GDP ratio, I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, that in the US, the debt to GDP ratio in 2022 was 121.3%, and it is projected to grow to 123.3% in 2023. The Canadian, hold a second. The Canadian debt to GDP ratio, Mr. Speaker, 2022, 107.4%, and it's projected to come down by slightly in 2023. Venezuela next door, Mr. Speaker, debt to GDP ratio, 159.5%. Suriname to the east, 120.1%. Guyana, Mr. Speaker, Dr. Singh, GDP ratio 2022, 26%. That is where we're positioned, Mr. Speaker. Trinidad and Tobago, 51%. So the debt to GDP ratio clearly is pointing, Mr. Speaker, when we look at the success in other countries, that Guyana is in a good place. Guyana is in a solid place. And we can borrow more, Mr. Speaker. We can borrow more to ensure that our people's lives are impacted upon. Not all of us, Mr. Speaker, have much time on our hands. Some of us are approaching our sunset years. And we need to ensure that our people enjoy the benefits of an economy that is growing, as Dr. Singh said, at a dizzying pace. And we need to put measures in place. And if we have to borrow to make life good for our people, Mr. Speaker, then that is what we have to do. I mean, the Honorable Member, Mr. Fernandez, also spoke about, well, said that our budgets are being financed by oil resources. Mr. Speaker, the record of this government clearly shows that even without oil, in that period, 92 to 2015, that we were developing our country, admittedly not at that fast rate, but even without oil resources, we were developing our country year after year and making lives good for our people. This budget, Mr. Speaker, although it's over $1 trillion, internal revenues, it's not totally financed by revenues from oil. Internal revenues amounted to $408 billion. And this is going towards also, Mr. Speaker, and financing our budget. So it is important that we know some of these things, and which goes to some of the points raised by Mr. Comrade Ronald Cox. The honorable member spoke about the numbers in the budget and what he said that advise our people not to be swindled by the numbers, and spoke about nurses and teachers and what is it in it for them. I think the Honorable Minister of Education spoke at length about the education sector and did not miss out much given the time allocated to her. But Mr. Speaker, if you'll permit me, I can say that teachers, 3,200 teachers were trained. Nurses, 700 of these nurses were trained. Between the teachers, nurses, and other members of the public service, they would have benefited from a cash grant of $1.7 billion. They would have also partaken in that salary increase of 6.5%, which amounts to another $7.5 billion. For teachers, Mr. Speaker, education, monthly education allowance, if you're pursuing upliftment in the academic field, $10,000 if you're pursuing the first degree, the bachelor degree, $20,000 if you're pursuing a master program, $30,000 if you're going towards the PhD program. These are benefits going towards the teachers outside of salary and other allowances. 4,500 teachers, Mr. Speaker, are expected to benefit from this program. And Mr. Speaker, added to that, all teachers, all graduate teachers would have moved up to the maximum scale. And 4,000 teachers here would have benefited from an amount of $1 billion, simply by moving up to the maximum scale under this program. Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Member Ganesh Maipal was talking about getting back into government. And the Honorable Member is from Guyana, and sought to say that we will win Guyana, we will win the rest of the country, and spoke about salaries. And also, Mr. Speaker spoke a bit about the 6.5% increase. Mr. Speaker, in the budget presentation, the Honorable Dr. Singh would have said cumulatively that 6.5% represents a 23% over the years increase to public servant. And that 6.5%, that $7.5 billion would have benefited 54,000 persons. Mr. Speaker, if I should quote Dr. Singh in terms of the Honorable Member Ganesh Maipal ambition to take back the government. But look, first let's deal with Guyana. Guyana, Mr. Speaker, in the recently held local government elections, You're contesting for 18 seats there in 9 constituencies. This island that Mr. Paul, honorable member, claimed that we have neglected, actually was neglected by the PNC, by the APNU, AFC. They were unable, Mr. Speaker. They were unable in this island that he claimed that we neglected. They were unable to contest in 5 constituencies. In 4, sorry, they did contest it last minute 5. We contested in all 9. We won 15 out of 18 seats. The AP and UAFC got 3 seats, and this is the model island that Mr. Paul is premising his victory on, in Piper's dream. Mr. Speaker, and it's not surprising, that island in 2015, Mr. Speaker, cultivated 2,455 hectares of rice. By the time we reached to 2020, under the AP and UAFC that did so much for Wakenham, that amount of hectares came down to 754. From 2,455, under the care in AP and UAFC, cultivation came down to 754 hectares. Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to announce that by last year, it has gone up back to 1,035 hectares. And this year, it's going to reach in the vicinity of 2,500 hectares. Mr. Speaker, there was a new school constructed in Wakenham, Arterville School. So, Mr. Speaker, that the AFC returned to power. It's this premise on this model of Wakenham. It's not going anywhere at all. Mr. Speaker, the honor, I'm doing some mapping up, Mr. Speaker, as we approach the end of the day. But some of these things, we need to respond to them to fix the record right. Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Ramsaru spoke about our emphasis on infrastructural development in such a manner as to say that this is not going to disparage it. In such a manner as to say that this is not going to help anyone. Mr. Speaker, and I didn't expect that from a gentleman who has some amount of experience in the forestry sector. And he would have lamented that his business suffered because of lack of access. And then to come to say that we should make roads that you can eat. Edible, if I should quote him correctly, edible roads. Mr. Speaker, we really need some scholarships over there about edible roads. Mr. Speaker, with the development of a road infrastructure of $204.1 billion, we are going to address concerns of food security, of transportation, of moving point A to point B, of value to your holdings. And Mr. Speaker, I can very well tell you that with proper roads in place, people will be able to cultivate more, they'll have access to all the services, they will have access to different centers, and life will become easier. Mr. Speaker, they will actually save more. Take, for example, the current situation coming from the Honorable Devdat Indar is not here, but if you have to come from over the river, Mr. Speaker, you have to leave your home if you're from Tushin at 6 a.m. if you want to get to work at 8 o'clock, because you have an inadequacy of road network. What happens in the evening? And in the afternoon, Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Paul, when we have Public Accounts Committee meeting, Mr. Speaker, he bitterly, and he said, if we can't finish by 3:30, we go until 7, because he wants to avoid the traffic. Mr. Speaker, His Excellency, the President spoke about this matter. Thousands of man-hours wasted on the roadway. Hundreds of gallons of fuel burned up just sitting in the line. Productive time gone to waste. Wear and tear on your machinery. So a road infrastructure actually will benefit you because you can put in another hour of sleep. You can get to work on time without idling anyway on the highway, without burning excessive fuel, without wear and tear on your machine. And this is only for the traveling public to work. Imagine the stress of the productive sector, Mr. Chairman. Imagine a rice farmer bringing his paddy, let's say from Region 3 to the rice mill at farm. Imagine the torture that he has to go through to bring a truckload or a tractor, which we often see, So the productive sector, Mr. Speaker, is under tremendous pressure with our limited road network. And it's not surprising, Mr. Speaker, that this visionary government has allocated $204.1 billion for an improved road infrastructure and the bridge with 4 lanes. And I'm happy for the residents of Region 10 that the sod was turned recently for the construction of that bridge. That single-lane bridge, Mr. Speaker, linking across the Demerara River, it's torturous, Mr. Chairman, if you have to go to the hinterland. One-way traffic is history now in this country, unless we want to go on Honorable Member Patterson bicycle lane, 3-lane bridge, then you can go with 2 or 3 of them, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, the member spoke about gold. Gold, actually, Mr. Speaker, gold production for the large company, or at least one foreign operator, actually increased. And it increased, Mr. Speaker, by 7.8%. Whilst overall gold declaration came down, this operator, because of size. And Mr. Speaker, I did a little bit of battle spinning in my days. Just out of high school, I work a bit under Chumach Falls, so I can spin a battle. Water, Mr. Speaker, is important for a small operator to wash the gold and all of that. And we have recently come out of an extended dry period, which was beneficial to the agriculture sector, the Honorable Minister will tell you, because it gave us an opportunity to get land preparation on the way, lands that we could not have put under cultivation for a long period of time. But in the gold sector, Mr. Speaker, the dry weather affected our small and medium-sized operators. And that is why we saw a decline. One of the factors, Mr. Speaker, of course, access will be another factor. Because to get into some of these locations, the Minister of Public Works, the 2 of them, need to put more roads there. They have to come for a supplementary, Mr. Speaker, which I will support, for more money to build more roads so that our small and medium-sized miners can have access to these areas. Notwithstanding that, Mr. Speaker, the extractive industries actually increased production by 42.6%, notwithstanding the decline in gold. Stone grew by 98%, which is a testimony, Mr. Speaker, to the construction boom, because this is another sector that took off in our effort, government and private sector, to create an infrastructure that is attractive to the kind of investment that we need to make this country really blossom. That the stone grew by 98%, sand grew by 21%, manganese grew by 13%. So these things were not mentioned by the honorable members because they look, and sometimes, Mr. Speaker, you wonder if we're talking about the same budget.
Honorable member, allow me to interrupt you at 8:08. We neglected to pass the motion to continue beyond 8 so that we can conclude the business of today. And Honorable Minister of Parliamentary Affairs, maybe you can move that motion so that until the end of the estimates that we suspend that provision so that we can complete the work of every day's business if it goes beyond 8 p.m. It's in the motion after the proclamation, might not be in the standing order book.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to ask that the standing order be suspended to allow us to continue and complete today's list of speakers at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. You can continue.
From 0, Mr. Speaker, or from... Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Honorable Chief Whip. The Honorable Member, Mr. Speaker, Ram Saruk, spoke about the Guyana Forestry Commission. Mr. Speaker, and it being bankrupt as if the People's Progressive Party, say from 2020 to 2023 made that bankrupt. And I want to quote what the Honorable Minister of Governance said back in August 2020, the 10th of August to be specific. And the headline of this article, Mr. Speaker, in the Guyana Chronicle state, the PPPC returns to a bankrupt GFC, Guyana Forestry Commission. Mr. Speaker, as the Guyana, and I quote from the article, as the Guyana Forestry Commission continues to struggle to pay its staff and other debts, Parliamentary Affairs and Governance Minister Gail Teixeira is questioning how the Commission could have descended to its state of bankruptcy when it had a surplus of $4 billion at the end of 2015. Of $4 billion. And this is what was said by the Commission was finding it very difficult, to pay its approximately 400 members of staff. So, Mr. Speaker, if we allow these things to go, one would go away with the impression as if Mr. Dharamkumar, supposedly being an authority on Forestry Commission, that, you know, he would have had, I didn't know he was on the board. Mr. Speaker, these are some of the things that I wanted to talk about. And in addressing other issues, Mr. Speaker,
you won't be able to address the other issues because you've gone much more than the 5 minutes over the time. So you need to just
wrap up.
Totally.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not going to say anything new. I'm going to say that Mr. Speaker, I just want to commend this budget to the National Assembly, and I hope that it received the unanimous support that it deserves. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Honorable Member. And now for the Honorable Member, Ms. Julia.